It's Wednesday night, December 4th, 2024. It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 8 a.m. in Singapore, 12 noon in Sydney, Australia, and here where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 8 p.m. Central Time. And you tuned in to another edition of Jim Peters at Night, and I'm Jim Peters. This is episode number 182. And you should mark that down somewhere in your house. I don't know why. I really don't. Our guest tonight is Jeff MEYER, the CEO and publisher of Conk News. I had lunch with Jeff this afternoon. We had a wonderful time. So we know all about what we're going to talk about. And we haven't talked it through yet. I want to apologize for those of you who are watching on the inner tubes, on the YouTube and the Rumble and all that sort of stuff on Trovo and Twitch and everything, because I need a shave really bad. And I was going to, about 6:30, about 90 minutes ago, I went to have one, and the sink in my sink in my bathroom is plugged up. so that's my excuse. That's what I'm going with. But it's actually really true. That's what happened. So I look like a little grizzly bear here. I kind of do. Hi, how you doing? I'm waving at the camera now. Yeah, can't do that on the radio. Okay, so we're gonna, Jeff MEYER's gonna be joining us in just a minute, and we are going to, in the meantime, we're going to hear a little message from Conk News. Here you go. I want to touch it. Oh my God, I can do this. Junkie, you should try this out. Conk News is a news aggregator. Now, there are plenty of news aggregators on the web, but Conk News is different than all the rest, and here's how. Most other news aggregators will lump the top stories from each news source under that news source. The top 10 stories, like, for example, from Fox News, Breitbart, the New York Post, etc. What Conk News does is it sends its servers out onto the web to over 75 different news sources every 3 hours. And yes, this is an automated process, but in this case, that's actually a good thing, and collects the latest stories from said 75 sources, and then lays them out on its own front page in the order they were posted, regardless of the source. So you see the latest stories at the top of the front page, regardless of where they're from. And this is all free to you. You don't need to log in. You don't need to subscribe, register, nothing. It's completely free. All you have to do is go to conk.com to check it out. That's conk.com, 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 Conk News. Jeff, are you there?
I'm here.
Joining us from his home in Prior Lake, Minnesota, his 10,000 square foot garage.
Talking about my garage.
Jeff MEYER, the CEO and publisher of Conk News. How you doing, big guy?
I'm good. It's Minnesota cold today.
Man, it is, isn't it? Holy buckets. I know. It's like not good. I think right now the temperature is like something like 11 or something like that, at least where I am. Of course, on the plains of Prior Lake down there, you're probably like colder even.
Well, we get the Wisconsin effect that it sucks so bad, sucking all that cold air out of the Dakotas across this beautiful state. It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And it's not easy being you either, is it?
Nope, just ask me.
Is it easy being you?
Yeah, you don't want to be.
Well, you got a lot of
tonight.
Say again?
I thought tonight I wanted to just cover something quick before we get into your list, if that's okay.
Please do. No, go ahead.
So there's a new law was passed in January 1st of 2024 that went into effect. It's called the Beneficial Ownership Information Reporting. So it's BOI is the acronym our beautiful federal government has. I'm just going to read this quick.
Yeah.
The BOI mandates that many U.S. businesses file information about their beneficial owners, individuals with substantial control over the company, with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, under the Corporate Transparency Act, the CTA. This aims to increase the transparency and combat illicit activities like money laundering by identifying the individuals truly behind a company. Now, the first company I incorporated was back in the early 90s. And from then till now, this has never come up. And the only common denominator, and I've asked my accounting firm, and remember, accountants and lawyers, typically 90% of them are liberals.
That's correct, right.
So when you ask them questions like this, like, oh, this is what happens when you have the Biden crime family be exposed, the IRS needs to overreact to the regular citizens that are just participating in the economy at an honest level. Crickets from my accounting firm, crickets from my personal accountant, because they don't understand that the cat is out of the bag on this shit. Now, when you think of this, Trump has got international businesses, right?
Yeah.
This never came up in all his years of being a piece of shit or whatever the Democrats have called him. They never had to enact any of this for him or Elon Musk or any other slimy conservative that's been a successful business person until the Biden crime family got exposed. Did our federal government say, we really should dig into this? Now, I've put off doing this more out of a protest than anything. And I've got 4 corporations I have to fill all this shit out for. Actually, I'm just paying these pricks at the accounting firm to do it.
Well, Jeff, could you be specific on exactly what this does?
Yep. So everyone that has a 25% share owns 25% or more of any shares in a company. Now, these are LLCs, subchapter S corps,
right,
C corps. This is for privately held businesses, have to list and have a government issued photo ID submitted so that they can have on record who the beneficial owners are of every small company in America. And some people might say, well, what's your problem with that? Well, the problem is if you don't do it, it's a $500 a day fine. So again, our government gets to be punitive. These are the same people that the government shut their business down during this fake COVID shit. They opened up, they fined them. But the Bidens have been able to successfully run businesses, and the old man was in on it, for 20 years with all sorts of foreign owners, right?
Yeah.
And I just think it's just one of these things where the Biden family can't get out of American politics quick enough. And the good thing is they won't circle back in because there aren't any successful, Hunter doesn't have a chance of running. But this is the shit that happens. This stuff affects every small business in America for no reason. No one was doing anything wrong.
Right.
But the story came out, and so our government reacts to it like, well, that must be happening all over the place. Well, my guess is it isn't. I'm not saying it isn't happening at all. I'm just saying the majority of small businesses aren't doing deals with Burisma and the Chinese government and all that other shit. And yet they want to charge you $500 a day if you don't fill out this paperwork.
Yeah. And if I'm right, the last count I heard is that the Biden family has like 30 dummy corporations or something like that.
Correct.
There's only one
Correct.
reason you have 30 dummy corporations, and that's to launder money. That's the only reason you do it.
Yes.
And people saying, well, there's not enough evidence. Oh, bullshit. There is too.
Right. There was such a lack of evidence that Joe had to pardon Hunter going back 10 years for everything, every piece of paper he's ever touched.
Yeah.
But we spoke at lunch. Now that people are looking at this, they think the workaround, Joe might have made another tactical error here. Because now Hunter, if he sits on the witness stand and swears to tell the truth and nothing but the truth and doesn't, that's a new crime and he can be punished for that.
Yeah.
So it will be, so who knows? That's why I need guys like Cash Patel that just want the truth. May not like it, may be painful, but give us the truth. We can handle it.
Well, the other thing we talked about today at lunch, and I ended up reading about this afternoon. I didn't know about this. We were talking about Pete Hegseth. Jesus Christ, I can't talk. And I, you talked about the allegations, the fact he's a drinker, and I had never heard that before. But I'm starting to read this, and I'm kind of reading between the lines that, well, I don't know if he's an alcoholic. The people at Fox News have come out vociferously about the fact he never drank, never came in drunk for any show ever. He did like 8 hours a week, on the weekends, and everyone says no. And I don't know. It just seems like they're piling onto this guy just to pile on, just to get rid of him, And then I'm wondering, well, why do they want to get rid of him? It's because they probably know he'd run ramshot over the Pentagon, and they need that.
Right. Well, that's why Mika and Joe have been on it all week.
Yeah, of course they have.
Cannot let this guy go.
And at this point, and you said this too, but at this point, if they're on it all week, it's not because they're trying to report anything. I mean, no, that's right. There's a reason they're on it all week. It's they're trying to get rid of somebody, and of course now go ahead.
And all, there's 17 panelists that are up on the screen. All start with, geez, if the guy has a drinking problem, we really want him to get help. No, you don't. It's like, if you heard me say, I really want the Democrat Party to find themselves. No, I don't. I don't.
Yeah.
If they start to find themselves, I want to cause them to get lost again. Get into the wilderness.
That's so funny. But I know what you mean. It's the truth, right? That's right. Yes. At least you're speaking to the truth. They aren't bothering.
Yes.
No. No, they aren't.
I mean, that's why watching Mika and Joe every morning, they went down and tried to kiss the ring down in Mar-a-Lago, came back and their friends piled on them, and they just figured, well, that fake story didn't work, so I guess we got to go back to just hammering on all these people that Trump's going to bring in to clean up the shitty. This is a shitty run business, and the business is the government of the United States of America.
Yes.
And it needs to be flushed down the toilet. It's going to be painful. If you don't think there's not going to be pain, then you're just not being honest with yourself. You want maximum pain so that people talk about it for the next 50 years. Like, remember when they disclosed, especially like in Minnesota, we had 2 huge $100 million plus scams revealed under the nose of this idiot Tim Walz. Now, when you bring that up to people, they're like, yeah, what is going on in this state? How do you lose $150 million to a Feed the Kids program?
Yeah.
And $250 million to some other Ponzi scheme? These people, you cannot. The thing with most conservatives is you want to give someone a break or say, okay, we're done. We don't have to fight anymore. Not with this group. You have to keep them pinned to the mat.
Jeff, you've got a really good point there. That's really true. That you would think by the ideologies of the party that it would be the Democrats that want to give people a break and the Republicans don't, but it's actually the opposite. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't have to take my word. Just look at history.
Yeah.
Look at history. They make Richard Nixon sound like he was scamming $10 million deals out of China. And he just got caught up in some stupid people's deal and tried to lie to it. Well,
yeah,
you can't cover up that lie, and they've never let that go. But that's chicken play compared to what the Bidens have done.
It absolutely is. And I've been saying this for the entire 4 years. You're absolutely right. What happened in Watergate is nothing compared to what's happening now. Absolutely. You're absolutely correct about that. And look all the crap okay. So Nixon's real crime was that he tried to cover that whole thing up, because the historians agree. And I had Jess Shepard on the show, his actual personal counsel, and he said, no, Nixon did not know about Watergate before it happened. He didn't. They did this, and they were trying to keep plausible denial of plausibility, and it all fell through. And then Nixon helped them cover it up, and that was actually his crime. It wasn't the actual break-in or what they were trying to do or anything like that. But compared to what's going on now, I mean, yeah, Nixon never screwed the government out of money. He never did. It's
right.
Terrible. It's awful. I mean, yeah, it's unbelievable.
And that's what we have to remind people of. When the government screws or wastes money, it's out of your pocket.
Yeah.
It didn't come from a money tree or corporate America. It came out of your pocket, either in higher prices at Target or out of your payroll check, or out of in Minnesota, almost a 10% sales tax on everything you buy.
Yeah.
You're paying a premium to this country club, and the country club sucks.
Yeah, it does. So you got Kash Patel and Hegseth, and the reason, I totally agree with you. They basically have to burn the thing down and start over, basically. But you were talking about pain. The public isn't going to feel any pain at all. I mean, we've talked about this. I know you agree with me on this. There's 4 million people employed by the federal government, non-military and militarily in the U.S. You could fire half of them, and absolutely nothing would change at all. Nothing. You'd still get your services. It's like no one would notice except that people are out of a job.
Yeah, and again, Vivek's already explained how they're going to do this. They're not going to give the media the fodder of, look at all these starving federal employees that are losing their homes. They've already figured that isn't going to play well on the nightly news. And so Vivek has already said several times in several different interviews, we're going to give them just like when a big corporation decides to close a division, they're going to get severance. Yep, we're going to spend that money again for a small bit of time.
Yeah.
But that will end. But the big cost is, that budget item that they're pissing money away because they can't have their budget have any surplus at the end of the year. They got to spend it or they don't get more the following year. All of that stops immediately. So that's where the savings is. The payroll is a part of it, but it's the heat, the lights, all the wasted office supplies, all that other nonsense that these huge bureaucratic offices suck up. And again, yeah, okay, so there aren't as many Post-it notes sold on a government contract. Good.
Isn't it amazing how for some reason, people who work for the government, along with the media, expect they should never get fired ever. They're just apoplectic about the fact that they're going to lose their job. And I just find that, I've been fired like a dozen times. It's like, Jesus Christ, how can you expect? And it's true of the media too. The thing about the media, and I know you know this, is that the only real thing you can get fired for is plagiarism. If you rip somebody else's words off, you're out of the door ASAP. That's it. But that's all. If you don't do that,
right,
it doesn't matter how incompetent you are. I mean, look at this woman, Taylor Lorenz, who works for the Washington Post, or did. She just quit. I mean, she's just an incompetent goofball. But or Joy Reid at MSNBC. I mean, these people should not be on television at all. And yet, as long as you don't rip anybody off, man, you get to keep your job. And I don't know how the hell they expect that. I don't see it.
Yeah, well, and one of the most glaring ones was Jeffrey Toobin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, you were so right. Yeah,
I mean, like, okay, everyone's a pig, but that guy took pig to a new level.
And if you did that in any other business, you wouldn't even be around for 5 more seconds.
Well, right. No, the women in the office would have ran me out.
Yeah,
just out of pure shame, which should have happened to them. But again, the media they're dying right in front of us. They are buggy whips, CBS, all the major media stations. All the, they're gonna change and fade away.
Yeah.
That's so, and there's already replacement media out there. So it isn't like there's a vacuum that has to be filled. It's already being filled. And that's why, Trump did Rogan. There won't be another debate.
Yeah. Why? That's right. I know.
Right. Where some questioners get to take their country club questions and ask you and try to do the getcha. It's like, hey, let's have a conversation for 3 hours and see how you put up.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I'm starting to think there might be something to this. People said they should do debates with no moderators, literally just the 2 candidates standing there and just go at it. That could be kind of interesting too, but
Sure.
might make for good television.
Yeah. But the debates as we know them are done.
Yeah, they are. I agree. Although, I don't know if you agree with me on this, Jeffrey. In this cycle, the vice presidential debate ended up being more consequential than the presidential debates, and that's never happened before.
Right.
Walz pretty much, or not Walz, Vance pretty much, rescued his reputation from that, and yeah, Walz looked like the knucklehead, like he said he was.
Yeah. Elmer Fudd. Watch him try to load a gun. His gun.
It's just so, I'm just astonished by how incompetent all these people are. That's the thing that, that's, and okay, so, we can sit here and talk about Hegseth, maybe he does or doesn't have a drinking problem, all this sort of stuff. And, and you could say, well, okay, the guy who, from the nuclear department who wore dresses and ended up stealing people's luggages, all right, that's a pretty bad thing. But the real difference is those people are incompetent. That's if they were brilliant, I think, something would have saved them. I stole luggage, but man, I'm just really kicking ass on the nuclear department. Probably something would have saved him. But no, that's the problem. The real problem is they're all incompetent. That's the problem.
Yeah, and again, Hegseth is their latest target. And I saw it on Conk today that Trump had given him a call and said, "Keep fighting." So.
Yeah.
And Trump will let you get knocked out, but he's not going to take you out. You can take yourself out. But if Hegseth wants to go toe to toe with the committee that's going to be interviewing him, or I forget what they call that.
Confirmation process, you mean?
Confirmation hearings. He just might have the stones to sit there. I mean, the guy's been literally shot at.
I know.
And the guys I know that have come back from being shot at in the service, that they're just they tick a little different than anyone else.
Right. I totally agree with you. I think there's a good chance he's going to survive this, And at that point, then, like I told you at lunch, I'm disagreeing with my boyfriend, Bill O'Reilly, and him and I aren't opposed very often, but I want to win this one. I don't want to let him go.
Yes. Right.
And and speaking of that, Jeff, you're talking about Conk News. I think we're going to leave it for tonight, and we'll go out with a Conk News commercial. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Hey,
thanks, Jim.
Thank you. We never really barely got to the list, so and I love that. That's fantastic. So I love it when you got stuff. So
all right.
You take care, Jeff. We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Talk to you soon. Yep.
That's Jeffrey Meyer. He's the CEO and publisher of Conk News at conk.com. That's conk.com. And, we have Conk commercials here, and I'm going to play one for you right now. Hi, all. Jim Peters again for Conk News. Let me tell you one of the greatest things about Conk News. It's free. It's completely and totally free. You don't need to register. You don't need to log in, subscribe, none of that stuff. Sure, they run a few ads on the front page, but if you're an old fogey like me, you might actually appreciate this because when you check out Conk News at conk.com, you'll probably notice that it's the closest thing to an old-fashioned hard copy newspaper that you'll find online. The latest up-to-the-minute news from 75 high-quality sources collected every 3 hours, all laid out with photos and headlines directly from the articles. And when you click on a story, you go directly to that story. No ad page, no interstitial page, none of that stuff. This is the way online news is meant to be. And did I mention that it's completely free? Seriously, how much of the stuff in America is free now, right? That's of quality anyway. So check this out for yourself. It's at conk.com, conk.com. Conk News. Okay, part 2 of Jim Peters at Night. I am Jim Peters. Our thanks once again to Jeff Meyer for talking to us. Always something interesting that going on there, man. So I'm going to tell you straight out, we're not taking any phone calls tonight because we have an abbreviated show. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you why, but we do. And I also said in the description, I have a mute button, but I don't want to use it while I'm actually talking. In the description today, I talked about something about time crystals and quantum computing, and we're not going to talk about that. We're not. I'm going to leave that for another time. I had a change of heart at the last minute. So what I do want to talk about is a guy named Ingo Swann. Now, this is not really news per se, because this is goes back ways, and I read his book, which is basically considered his autobiography. This weekend. He died in 2013 and he wrote the book in 1998. It's called Penetration. Now, Ingo Swann is a really interesting guy because here's the deal. First of all, I have to tell you, this stuff I'm going to tell you is actually verified. This is not any sort of speculation. It's not rumor. Ingo Swann was considered the star of a CIA project called Project Stargate. And what it was about is they gathered a bunch of people who they thought could do what's called remote viewing. And remote viewing is when you sit in a room and you psychically project your soul out into the ether and go and look at other things that are not physically connected to you in any way. And this sounds incredible, but the reason the CIA started doing it is because the Soviets started doing it, and so they had heard that it was working. So Ingo Swann was apparently the star of this project. He was the person who was best at it. Now, here's the real amazing thing. I have a real hard time with this, but still, this is supposedly true. And Louis Elizondo, in his book Imminent, that came out about 3 months ago, he devoted a chapter to this because he said he was involved in one of the programs. And he says, and Swann says this too, that anybody can be taught to do this. He said, just like like cooking, some people are better than others, but anybody can be taught to do it. And I have a very hard time with. I was a longtime musician, and if you know anything about music, the perfect pitch is completely a genetic phenomenon. You either have it or you don't. And I kind of thought, well, that's kind of the way this would go too. But no, they swear, and Elizondo says this too, that he was taught how to do this. But then again, like I said, some people are better than other things than others. And Swann was apparently the star of this project. And he wrote a couple books about how to do it, and then he wrote his autobiography. And the autobiography is really interesting because one third of it is devoted to one single incident that throughout his career, and it goes as thus. And this is the part where this is really wild shit. And Swann did say, he said he has absolutely no physical proof that his story is true. So he said, you either buy it or you don't. So Swan said in 1975 he was involved in the Stargate program, the remote viewing program in the 1960s. Or I think it ended in 71. Now supposedly it's still being used. That project's done, but supposedly the CIA is still doing this because, believe it or not, it works. It is proof positive that there's some sort of ESP process that that humans have. In Utah, you got to remember James Randi, the amazing Randy. You know, he had a $1 million award for anybody who could actually distinctly prove that there was any sort of psychic ESP phenomena existed. And apparently, well, he never awarded the money, but he was never going to, because he refused to accept this apparently. But your government that's spending your money, they said it worked, and who are we to doubt them, especially for something that's such a crazy idea. So anyway, in 1975, Swan said he was contacted by a friend of his that there was a government agency that wanted to employ his services, and he went through a huge machination of meeting these people. He had to go to a museum. I mean, it was all very, very like cloak and dagger crap. And he ended up being driven. He flew and then being driven to a remote location where he did not know where it was. And he said it was obvious that he was where he was when they took the mask, the hood off his head, that he was somewhere underground. That's what he said. He said seemed, and he met a guy named Mr. Axelrod, who was Alex for short, or Axel for short. Excuse me. So Swan pioneered one of these techniques called coordinated remote viewing, and that is when you got only coordinates like longitude and latitude to a location, and you went there with your mind. And the reason they did that is because they wanted to take any bias out of it at all. In other words, if you've been like on Route 673 in West Virginia or wherever the hell it is, they want to make certain that wasn't affecting what you were doing. So he said, well, let's do this. And then people say, well, how would that work? I mean, most people do not have coordinates memorized, and it's very hard to do. But the theory supposedly is that somebody somewhere knows where everything on the map is. And Swan explained it as you basically like tune into the ethos of the universal consciousness, and you're able to find that place. He said that's basically how that works, because it did end up working. They could give you longitude, latitude, and these people who did this, these remote viewers, they could actually project their mind to that location. So the guy, Mr. Axelrod, says, well, we're going to do something a little different. We want to send you to places on the moon. This is 1971, okay? No, 1975, excuse me. So all the Apollo launches are done. We ended with the last one, Apollo 17, I think it was 1972. So he said, we want to send you some places on the moon. And so he said, well, okay, fine, let's do that. And they did the same thing. They gave him coordinates, the longitude and latitude coordinates of places on the moon. And they asked him to go there. So he went to this one place, and he said, first of all, there was clouds and a mist. And he said, well, I'm not on the moon. I must be somewhere on Earth. They said, no, just keep going, keep going. And then he said he saw a bunch of structures, huge structures, enormous structures, like a tower, like a mile tall. And this is the really weird part, and he never figured out why this was, and nobody has an explanation. But he says he saw people walking around, working in a crater, and obviously digging up some stuff. But not only did they not have spacesuits on, he said they were completely and totally naked. And he said, well, this can't be right either. I can't be on the moon. And the Mr. Axelrod said, no, just keep going and keep going. And finally, he said the people who was watching in this crater, they noticed him. Now, look, I don't know how. Even he doesn't understand how this works, but he said that these people noticed that he was remotely tunneling psychically into their location, and so he ended up having to quickly leave. So he deduced at some point that although those people looked human, they weren't. They were actually extraterrestrials. And Mr. Axelrod basically, I'm cutting to the chase here. He basically said that's true. So the first third of this book is about that whole. There's way more to the story than this. I mean, if you want to read a good yarn, it's actually pretty good, even if you don't buy it. But the other 2/3 of the book, the second part is involved the moon itself, and the third part involves uh, telepathy among extraterrestrials, which, I don't know if you do a lot of reading about this. Obviously, I do because I talk about this all the time. But pretty much everybody who's been abducted by aliens says they communicate with them telepathically, that no actual words or acoustics are involved. So the question is, well, if they can do that, well, why can't we? And then Swan basically answers his own rhetorical question: well, we can. We just don't know how to do it, or we don't try. But anyway, it's a fascinating book. And the other thing I wanted to bring up here, the second part of the moon, and this has now been verified, even though Swan says that the moon was always sold to us as a dead, lifeless planet. That there's no atmosphere, there's nothing growing there. But he also points out, and I know this is true for a fact, that since the beginning of the 20th century, over 100 years ago, people have seen clouds on the moon, and there's many, many photos of this. And well, how could you have clouds if there's no atmosphere? And then he talks about the Apollo 11, and this is a very, very famous story. And this is a part where people say this is the proof, or one of the proofs, that they faked the whole thing, about the fact that that Aldrin and Armstrong planted the American flag at Tranquility Base, and it started to billow in the wind. And Swan said that actually happened, and that's because there is actually wind on the moon. Now, you can say that's nuts, but he has pointed out that's really true. This has also been verified, that we know from astronomical data, especially when the moon goes in front of stars. We can tell that the stars, the vision of the stars ends up being distorted by an atmosphere. Now, let me give you some comparisons here. The atmosphere of Earth is about 62 miles deep, right? So if you're going to translate that into feet, about just for roughly rounding purposes, 1 mile is about 5,000 feet, 5,280 exactly, but it's about 5,000 feet. So if you're going to do that, so you got 62 miles of atmosphere. On Earth, the first 10,000 feet, or the first 2 miles, are breathable. Beyond that, you need apparatus, which is the reason why people climb up Mount Everest, which is 27,000 feet above sea level. That's the reason they need oxygen. You can't do without it. So let's do a little math here. 10,000 feet, or 2 mile, or about 2 miles, is about 4% of 62 miles. Now, we know now that the atmosphere on the moon, although it's very slight, and the moon has 1/6 the gravity of Earth is, which is a reason, the whole atmosphere is only 3 miles. In other words, it's about 5% of the atmosphere of Earth. But if you were going to extrapolate that, this is the math I did ahead of time, then you're talking about maybe 300 feet of breathable air. So, and the really interesting thing, and Swan says he notices, in his vision, the beings he saw, he said they looked identical to humans, but he thinks they weren't. But that was his own personal speculation too. Especially if you're in a crater, that's probably where the atmosphere and or breathable oxygen would congregate. So now, since that time, since 1975, we have determined, yes, there's water on the moon. We've determined that now. That was determined, I think, about 10 years ago, supposedly. And so if you have water, you have the possibility of having clouds. And if you have an atmosphere, you have the possibility of having clouds. And so basically, what Swan is saying is that all that stuff he saw has basically been more or less been verified scientifically. And publicly too. I mean, this is the thing now. I mean, people are now acknowledging that the moon has a small atmosphere. But the thing I read is that literally it was like only literally 6 inches off the surface. But no, we know now because of the way the stars are blotted out that that's obviously not true. It's about 3 miles. And like I said, if you're going to do the same math we do here on Earth, that means you have about 300 or 400 feet of breathable air, and also about the fact that the thing that happened in Apollo 11, which people have said all along, they said, well, no, that flag waving in the wind is proof that they weren't there. But no, what is actually proof is the fact there's an actual atmosphere on the moon. And supposedly, Swan said he found out later that in all the subsequent Apollo landings, they made certain that flag was reinforced so that it would not wave in the wind. And it was real wind. Now this is really amazing stuff, but I do know from my knowledge of astronomy that all this stuff has been verified. It has. And the thing about the remote viewing, I don't know crap about that. I don't. But this guy he has it's Swan, SWANN, Ingo, INGO. He has a entry in Wikipedia that you can check out, and talks about all this stuff. And I found his book fascinating. I just did. So that's our show for tonight, and that's our show for this week. I'm going to go visit my 100-year-old mother in southern Minnesota tomorrow, and it's going to be cold. She called about 2 hours ago and said, don't come, it's going to be cold, but it's going to be a really nice driving day. I explain how this works here in the frozen Northland, and that is the reason Buffalo gets more snow than us, although we're colder than them. And the reason is because when it gets really cold here, basically you end up with high pressure, and high pressure pushes out the clouds, and you have a very, very nice sunny day. And then that's when this is really weird, but it's true. That's when you know it's not going to snow. So we're supposed to have a good day tomorrow, but cold. But I get dressed up, and I got a really nice warm car. So anyway, that's where I'm going tomorrow. We'll have a show on Monday. I should be solo. We're going to have at least one guest next week, but I don't know who's going to end up where. So I'll tell you about that on Monday. Anyway, I want to thank you folks for watching. I want to thank you folks for listening. Sorry about the shave. We'll get the bathroom sink fixed tomorrow. Oh man, good times, huh? Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks to Jeff Meyer for joining us tonight too. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie, and good night to you wherever you are. We'll see you. You guys have a nice weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.